Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm really excited. We have a really cool guest today. This is her second appearance with us at the Apartment Queen. And today we're going to be covering a little bit of a different structure and a different topic. Today we're actually going to be covering her experience when it comes to leasing centers, when it comes to commercial strip centers, and really anything in that realm. That is not something that I know about. So we get to bring in the experts to talk about the pros and cons of these types of cash flowing commercial assets. So Beth, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure, Kaylee. Thanks for having me again. I always like to chat with the Apartment Queen because I don't know anything about that either. So it's good. We're a good partnership here. So I own a small portfolio of strip shopping centers down in South Florida worth about $87 million. I've been in the business for 34 years. I invested as a limited partner from the age of about 28 to when I left that firm in 2004. So I was 44 and I'm 60 now. I've been on my own for 16 years and I have been the general partner on a bunch of deals. So, retail people are like, oh, how could you invest in retail? Everything's going online. And I think that your audience would, be pretty surprised to know that of the $5.4 trillion of retail revenue, as of December 1st, 2020, only 13% of that number is online retail sales. Now, we know it's rising rapidly, but the experts don't believe it'll get higher than 30. So let's say they're wrong and it goes to 40%. In my mind, that leaves us retail investors, shopping center investors, 60%. I don't know about you, Kaylee, but when we were shut down, I couldn't wait to go out and go to restaurants and go to my hair salon and go to my nail salon. So I think that the right retail will continue to flourish.
That is a really awesome statement. I mean, no, I don't know anything about what exactly that you do. And so that does surprise me, to tell you the truth. And it's good to hear because, where I think we have some challenges ahead, whether it's different changes in technology, whether it's the vaccine, all the things we're dealing with in 2020, 2021. But I guess, so that's obviously a little bit situational based on how things are right now, which I'm glad we covered that. But what I like to ask on this interview is specifically, what are the pros and cons of what you do? So if I wanted to get involved in doing like mixed use, which is like kind of what you see behind me, where it's like apartments on top and then the bottoms instead of garages might be like a Walgreens, might be a grocery store, might be something else. Retail, I have no knowledge to be able to invest in that kind of asset. So what would be some of the cons, I guess, historically, normally, of having something that, like what you're specializing in?
So the cons would be probably the whole move to online. So you want to make sure that if you're investing in a strip center, the word necessity came up a lot during the pandemic, right? So make sure that the tenants that lease in your plaza, if you're investing in a strip center, are necessity retail. So we know that if ladies want to get their nails done, they can do it at home and they can dye their own hair. But I think we all would prefer to go somewhere to be a little pampered. So for me, finding the retail properties where you have necessity retail is crucial versus you're seeing around the country malls closing. Well, the reason a lot of malls are closing is they built too many of them, right? Supply and demand, right? Us in real estate, when we need one asset class in one area, we overbuild typically. So, and they didn't have any unique qualities. You and I could be in a mall in Des Moines, Iowa, in Boston, Massachusetts, and Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and if we didn't know what city we were in, we might think we're in the same city because the mall had the same old tenants, not a lot of unique characters. So I think that don't invest in something that isn't unique and that's not necessity retail and that is not overbuilt. When I look at properties to buy, people call me and they go, there's this great strip center. It's only $50 a square foot. The replacement costs are $200. And then I say, okay, well, how many centers are around that deal? And they're like, well, there's 40 other ones. Like, okay, not interested, right? Supply and demand. I don't mind if the place is $200 a square foot if it's the only game in town, right? I'm all about that. So I think supply and demand, uniqueness, and necessity are crucial when investing in retail.
What would you say would be unique? So, for example, if I'm looking at a hotel, it's pretty obvious what's a boutique hotel, what's a chain. In your industry, what is unique?
So unique are, so you could have a Starbucks, and that would be great for credit and great for financing. But if there's a Starbucks across the street and it's killing it, then you want to go find the coolest, hippest, owner-occupied, entrepreneurial-run coffee shop that the anti-Starbucks people go to, that's funky and cool. That's unique, right? We have one down here in South Florida called Ella's, and it's phenomenal, and they're really taking market share away from the big companies. So over the holidays, I wanted to bring toys into my shopping center because Toys R Us is closed, and there's like, the stats are when Toys R Us closed, $400 million of toy business was up for grabs. Well, Walmart grabbed $100 million, Amazon grabbed $100 million, and Target grabbed $100 million. Well, so I read that there's another $100 million out there to be found. And I believed that because of COVID and the lack of graduation parties, birthday parties, sleepaway camps, and vacations, that parents were going to have this pent up money that they haven't been spending, and guilt because they've been depriving their children. So I wanted to bring in a toy store into my shopping center. So I went out and found, the 20 independently run toy stores in South Florida, and I got a hobby store that sold $300 and $400 remote control cars to come in and try a temp store for 3 months. And if they did well, they would sign a long-term lease. I just found out they did $147,000 in December. They want to sign a long-term lease. So that is a unique tenant that not every strip center has, a hobby shop with remote control cars.
That's super cool. Yeah, you're right. And those, my adoptive dad actually used to have a company that competed with Hobbytown. And so they had these cool, like, big boats that had, real motors, but they were small or whatever. And they'd go like 60 miles an hour.
That is awesome.
That's awesome. Okay, so now I understand what you're saying by uniqueness. And I think you're right, because what is going to make someone leave their house? It's got to be something unique. Now, if you're speaking about what you do or your area of expertise, what would you say would be a major pro over some of the other cash flowing commercial real estate that's out there?
So as much as I love to invest in multifamily, I really like not having to manage it, because I have this thing about, I don't want to invest. I don't want to be managing anything with a bed in it, meaning I feel bad when I have to evict a retail tenant. I'm not happy about it, but I've done it a bunch. Obviously, I've been in the business 34 years. So for me, I'd rather evict someone in their business than out of their bed. So that is a pro for me, because, I'm kind of a tough chick, but I don't think I'd be so tough if I had to put a family out on the street. So that's one pro. Another pro is, I believe, at least for the last, thousands of years, people like to shop. So, and I believe that going forward, people will continue to like to shop. So I think it's an asset class that is necessity. Like right now, we're learning that hospitality is, not the asset class of choice right now, and very sad about that. So I just think for me, I like to shop. I think people like to shop. And if I had to take action on an eviction, I'd rather do it on a business than a family out of their beds.
Now, in your line of business, I could make some certain assumptions, but I just would rather ask the expert. When you're looking at a new business to buy, like valuing it, is it the same way as multifamily, where you're looking at what kind of income the property is bringing in, what kind of expenses they're experiencing, looking at like a P&L and the net operating income being kind of like your, not all the things, but, a major gauge of how the business is doing? Is that the same?
Yeah, we definitely look at that. And the two other things we look at are, we look at the tenant's sales. Mm-hmm. So for example, if I'm buying a shopping center and there's a Starbucks, and the Starbucks is doing $3 million, and I know an average Starbucks is doing $2 million, that gives me a sense of security on looking ahead income, right? So tenant sales are what drives rent and rent growth. So for us, and then it also is credit of the tenant. So maybe the hobby store, because it's they have two locations, they're not going, that cap rate that an investor would give on a hobby shop might be a 10 cap versus a Starbucks might be a 6 cap. So we're looking at the credit of the tenant, and the credit meaning all about the security. Is that tenant at time of renewal going to stay? But so it really, really goes back to the sales of the tenant, the revenues. If like my hobby shop, if they continue to do $150,000 a month, if I ever went to sell my property and a buyer would look at that, he'd like, oh, this guy's staying because he's killing it.
Yeah. Wow. And then you had the idea to put it in there, Yeah, but I guess that's interesting. So that leads to kind of my next question. I'm trying to kind of compare and contrast a little bit. So, for example, for me, when I'm looking at businesses like a multifamily business, and I'm trying to compare it against maybe some others in the area, or really, so I'm curious, how do you compare what's good and what's bad to industry averages, to your experience? Like, where do you, when you're looking at a prospective tenant and their income or what they're doing, how do you kind of judge, whether it's a good investment or a bad investment besides their current business, like historicals, their previous businesses they've owned? How do you do that? And I'll ask another question about types of leases next.
Okay, so we have this magical book.
Yeah.
And the book, the Urban Land Institute created the book. It hasn't been printed since '06, but it doesn't really matter because it was printed like every 2 years for about 10 years, and now they stopped printing it in '06, but it's pretty consistent information. And it gives you every use, so liquor store, nail salon, fast food, chicken, and it will tell you based on historical stats and their margins what they can afford to pay in rent. So it's on my desk. I look at it every day. So if a liquor store calls me and I say, well, the rent is $30 a square foot. Oh, well, that's not, that's too much. And, well, what do you do in sales? Do you do $1 million in sales? And in this book, it'll say a liquor store can pay 14% of their sales to rent. So it's a magical book. Everyone should have it on their desk. It's very hard to find now because they stopped printing it. But so that's what I use. Other people have told me that they can also find rule of thumb, occupancy costs. That's what it's called online. I have yet to find that. But the rule of thumb is 10, that no tenant should pay more than 10% of their sales. So if a nail salon or a liquor store said, we project we can do $1 million, then they can't pay more than $100,000 per year. If they were in 3,000 square feet, that's $30. So the rule of thumb is 10, but there is definitely tenants like pizza, like Domino's Pizza, that can pay 25% because they don't have a lot of overhead. They have a bunch of dough, right? So it has to do with margins, etc. But yeah, this book I've been using this book for 34 years.
Wow. Yeah, it's like the almanac, the Bible of commercial leasing. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the types of, so that's kind of how you judge, do I want to move forward with this renter, essentially. Now, the types of leases that somebody can use on an income-producing property or engage with, do you have rules on what they can do? Like, we will only do triple net leases. We will only do, I forget what it's called, but it's a percentage of the income that you get. There's a couple different kinds. Which ones do you engage in and why?
So I like triple net, all triple net, meaning the tenants pay the real estate taxes, the maintenance, and the insurance. I did buy a center 5 years ago, and all of the tenants were gross leases, meaning they paid $3,000 a month and everything got thrown in. And my goal was to convert every single tenant to triple net, which I'm down to my one last tenant that I haven't done that with. So I'm very happy about that because expenses can go up, right? Utility bills can go up, taxes, insurance. And if they go up and you don't have a triple net lease, then it's eating into your base rent, right? You just got you just got what's it called, a drop in pay. So we want all of the leases to be triple net. And then there are percentage rent leases. So in fancy lifestyle centers where you might see theaters and restaurants and, really foo-foo places, they will do something called a percentage rent deal where they'll say you need to pay $40 a square foot, but if you do over $3 million in sales, you have to give me another 2% of your sales over 3. And that's called the percentage rent deal. I don't have those fancy deals, those fancy projects. The only time I ever do a percentage rent deal is maybe if I have someone who I really think's going to kill it in my center, like let's say the hobby store, and maybe they're on the fence and I want 30 in rent per square foot and maybe they want to pay me 20. I might be creative and say, look, I'll do 20, but if you do over $100,000 of rent of sales in a month, you have to pay me 3% of the difference up until the point I get my 30, and then we cap it at that. So I'm a creative landlord and I'll do things like that. So those are the two ways of doing percentage rent. So gross rents are terrible. And but it's a great opportunity as an investor. If you can find a shopping center that have all gross rents, I promise you, like for me, it's taken me 5 years. I'm down out of 17 tenants. I'm down to 1. Tenants call and ask for something all of the time. And that's when you say, sure, I'll do that, but I need this.
That's perfect. So when you're saying that a gross lease is kind of an opportunity, my next question was going to be about comparing the business types where what I look for in multifamily is a value add. And so there's different things we can do to increase income, decrease expenses, make it do things that add more equity or more value to the property so that we get more equity is what I meant to say out of it when we're finished, or we can refinance it out or whatever. When it comes to your industry, is the gross lease or what are the value adds, or is that the space you play in? If not, what is? It's like 5 questions.
Definitely taking it from gross to triple net is definitely a value add. Another value add is adding drive-throughs. So right now, drive-throughs are the king and queen and court of my industry. Everyone has announced that they're moving. Every Starbucks, every Panera, every Chipotle, Wawa's, they all want drive-throughs. So if there's a Starbucks down the street, they're going to move that to a drive-through. So if you have a center where you've got an end cap, like the space on the end, and there's enough parking lot for you to add a drive-through, you can literally add probably $300,000 to that net income by just adding the ability for someone to do a drive-through. Down here in South Florida, there are like very long strip centers. So instead of a 20,000 square foot strip center, some people like maybe have owned or bought 40,000. So picture this long running strip center with a bunch of vacancy because it's hard to lease something like that. Down here in South Florida, people are knocking down the middle of it and adding a drive-through.
Oh, that's a good idea. That actually gave me an idea for a friend of mine who has a bunch of Chili's.
Oh yeah, for sure. Drive-throughs are the king and queen. So that is a way. Another way to add value is I bought a center once that was 75,000 square feet. It had an anchor space. You're too young to know this tenant, but it was called Comp USA. It was a dying tenant. I bought it. People said, you're crazy. Like Comp USA is going to go out. And I'm like, yeah, I hope so. Because my plan was to bring in a grocer, which I started negotiating while I was under contract with Fresh Market. They ended up going across the street to an Empty Borders Books that vacated during the time I had the property in due diligence. But better for me because I ended up doing an Aldi, which is much better credit than Fresh Market. So I took an 8 3/4 cap rate investment, replaced an non-grocery anchor with an Aldi, and now I could sell that deal at a 5.75 cap rate. So that's another way to add value.
OMG. That's awesome. That is awesome. Now, what kind of range of those types of tenants that have been in your shopping centers have you dealt with? So one thing I learned a while ago from a friend of mine who is a Taco Bell franchisee, so that he said that we are C class, so we put our ours in different communities where sometimes you'll see a Subway, sometimes you won't. You'll see a certain class of restaurants. Is there a certain class that you play in? And I guess could you give a couple of examples of those?
Yes. So I like really, really, really high income or really, really, really low income. And I don't like the middle. So I like the high income because of the people have very high disposable income. So they'll eat out a lot. They'll spend money. I like them to be near hospitals and colleges because it adds a daytime population to the shopper. So that means I have the weekend and evening from my neighborhoods, rich people. And then I like the hospital workers and the college students to support my tenants during the day. So I like that. I also like, in Miami, we have inner city urban areas, and I'm a partner in a inner city urban area. And why do I like that is because, unfortunately, there are very few developers that build in those areas. So my partner built in that area. And because, again, back to supply and demand, we have a Walmart, we have a Ross Dress for Less, we have a 7-Eleven, we have a Wingstop, we have a ton of tenants that want to serve that community, but no one builds shopping centers in that community. So I love those markets too, but I don't like the middle. I don't like where it was older people and now it's becoming lower income, or was young families and now it's senior citizens. Like, I don't like markets in flux because it's very hard to lease. Like, do I lease to the podiatrist and the hearing aid, or do I lease to the check cashing? So if it has any kind of mixed demographics, I stay away.
That is awesome advice. I'm learning so much. Oh my God. Now, I wanted to ask, honestly, have you ever been involved with a shopping center that was connected to housing, like a mixed use type of development, or mixed use pre-existing, or anything like that?
Personally, I have not. So there's a lot of people that have. For me, I like to, what is it? Warren Buffett says, keep it simple, stupid. I just don't know enough about it. Now, I have been hired to lease the retail stuff on the ground floor, but I've never owned a mixed use yet. That's not to say I'm developing a project now. Well, and pre-pandemic, I had a hotel that wanted to go on top of retail. Obviously, that deal's dead. So I'm working on a Wawa instead, where I won't even build the retail. I'm just going to do a ground lease with the Wawa. But so for up till now, I try to keep it all retail because I understand it, I know it, and it takes away the complication.
Because that gave me an idea. I'm like, ooh, I can do what I know, and then,
Absolutely. Let's talk,
yeah.
Kaylee. I'm always open to talking.
Because it was sad because one day, and it may not have been a community that would have been a good fit for this at all, but there was an opportunity twice now where that's been an opportunity that I've passed up simply because I didn't know. So, yeah, we will for sure talk. Beth, have you done any mixed use, or not mixed use, any communities that are, or not communities, sorry. Have you done any shopping centers or anything centered around a medical center or like a ER or anything like that? And what's good or bad about that?
I have leased to urgent cares in my shopping centers, and I love them. And I love owning strip centers across from hospitals. That's a great investment. Yeah. Great investment. I'm looking at one now right in front of a hospital. The hospital's competing with me to buy it. So they might win because they have a bigger checkbook than me, but love it. Love medical. There's a term in my industry now called med tail. So instead of retail, med tail, because dentists and orthodontists and podiatrists and MRI imaging and urgent cares, they're all popping up, and going into shopping centers where before they would be in medical office parks. And now they're realizing that they could be more front and center and get more traffic and not be hidden.
No, you're 100% right, because I forgot what it was for, but there was a doctor I was looking for in Dallas, and there were like a bazillion of them inside UT Southwestern Medical Center, and I did not want that. Like, it was within one number, and then you had to figure out what the extension to. I just didn't want to deal with it, so I just literally found one that was existing by itself. That's so true. Because it was just like, and it's confusing, and I know that's lazy, but
The psychology of the consumer today is frictionless.
Yeah.
So make it hard, but there's an easier option. They're going with the easier option. Right. We don't have time for friction.
That's 100% true. Beth, I really appreciate you getting on here with me today, and I have so many more questions, but we make these interviews relatively short so that everyone can soak in a lot of information. If anyone has any questions about, getting more information about what you do, partnering with you, investing with you, etc., how can they get a hold of you?
So BethAzor.com, very easy, or LinkedIn. So just reach out to me in either of those places, or the Clubhouse.
Yes. I see you on there all the time. I've learned so much on there. Well, thank you everybody for taking the time to watch and listen and learn today from the expert, Beth Azor herself. I'm so happy that you got in here with me and had the time before we get our book out. So I will see you hopefully again soon, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, Kaylee.
See ya.